Hello and welcome to The Agenda with me and Phil Moorhouse, where we sort of have a little bit of a wrap-up of all the crap that's happened throughout the week. And there's been quite a lot of it this week. We've had trees chopped down, we've had Rishi Sunak backpedaling on green agenda stuff, we've had Labour lambasted for saying that they want to get rid of, make schools pay VAT. Yeah. And we've also had Sunak say he's going to get rid of inheritance tax, which only has to be paid by, he wants to rid people of the horrors of inheritance tax. I did a whole video about it yesterday.
I must have missed that because he was denying it a couple of days ago.
Yeah, but basically he wants to set it up so that his kids don't have to pay.
Well, he wouldn't anyway.
300 million.
Yeah, Labour have been putting out an advert going, you get out of it anyway. And it's been a tax for being inaccurate because even with the current rules, they get out of it anyway. But it's still true of Labour to say it. He is going to save 300 million.
Yeah.
Effectively. But he does that with the current rules.
But he'd have to be dead,
tax,
which is cool.
Well, yeah. But I mean, again, I don't think too many people will be disappointed with that outcome either. But I'm kidding.
Kidding,
but
joke. It's a joke.
But no, he'll get away with it anyway. I mean, what was it? What's that fella? That super billionaire.
Sunak.
No, the aristocrat. Forgotten his pissing name.
Richard Drax.
Proper like 8-odd billion. He inherited 8-odd billion.
Oh, the Duke of Westminster.
Yeah,
the Duke of Westminster.
Paid not a penny.
Yes,
not a penny of inheritance tax. So
9 billion.
People shouldn't imagine just because inheritance tax is a thing, it's like everyone pays it. No, the rich don't pay tax. Once you're above a certain level of wealth, you don't pay tax. Rishi Sunak, with the current system, there would be no money paid. There would be nothing paid on his inheritance at all.
So, just before we came on, we were talking about what we're going to discuss, and obviously, I want to talk about why is the Sun saying that there's going to be a snap election? What is in it for the Sun? Because I didn't want to click on the link because I will not click.
Well, I haven't, but when the Sun is the only thing reporting on it. And it's like easy just to say, oh, the Sun just published a load of rubbish, but they do, and everyone knows it, even their own readers know it. So if it's only the Sun reporting it, if someone else reports it later independently, not like, oh, the Sun has said this thing, but if they say, oh, we've got this independently verified, fine. Because occasionally the Sun do report the news, but they also are a sounding board for what sometimes the Conservatives say, oh, could you publish something about this one on a wrong foot Labour or something like that. So they'll happily do it. And they'll do it because they have no credibility anyway. If you look at like credibility amongst both Labour and Conservative voters, the Sun is way down there. Like no one treats it seriously.
Well, good. I mean, I'm a Scouser, so I want the Sun to just burn in hell forever. So
there is. There will be very likely a snap election or a reaction. We say a reactionary election. In that, because if you think about it at the moment, one of two things. Like right now, the polls say the Conservatives will lose the election and probably quite badly. That's that's obvious. So if you're one of the people deciding when there should be a general election, you're part of Rishi Sunak's advisors on this specific matter, whether you be in the cabinet or just one of his political advisors or strategists, whatever. You either believe that next year you can do something to turn the polls around so you can get yourself into a winning position, in which case it still has to be reactionary because you'll have to wait for when the polls change. Or you know that you're going to lose, and it's just a case of finding when is the best time when the polls are at their narrowest so that you can lose with as little damage as possible, in which case it's still reactionary. So whatever you believe, if you are part of the decision-making group, whether you believe it is possible to reverse the polling situation or whether you believe it is not, you still don't know when the election's going to be until you're ready to call it, because you're having to wait for like the stars to align for you.
Yeah.
So yes, people will be on, will be on like a sort of like a footing of, we could have an election at any time, because that's true. We could have an election at any time.
Yeah.
But I don't necessarily take anything seriously that the Sun reports unless I see it independently verified by other organisations. I would sooner believe the Express than the Sun.
But I mean, if the Tories were gearing up to have a snap election in the next couple of months, like, first of all, I really don't want another winter election, and that'd be absolutely awful.
Awful for them.
Yeah. Well, we all, yeah. I mean,
because it's still incredible to me that they could get away with it in 2019 when there were, this is before COVID. The NHS winter crisis was so bad that there were people just dumped on the floor in corridors, not even on a trolley in a corridor, on the floor, and it was like there were no rooms, there were no trolleys, there were no chairs. It was just the floor.
yeah.
And they got away with this. A journalist put this to Boris Johnson, showed him photos on his phone. He just took the phone off him. And but that was because everything else, Brexit and Corbyn were the big features of that election. If they had the election this winter, there's nothing, there's none of those things in the Tories' favour.
No.
So,
but the longer they leave it, do you think the longer they leave it? Because everything they're they're throwing everything against the wall: culture wars, immigrants, asylum seekers, the environment, net zero, like everything, but nothing's sticking. No. Absolutely, so Sunak, after dialing back on all those environmental pledges, they've actually gone down in the polls overall. You know what I mean? It's like he's had no bounce from it at all. It's just been quite painful. Charlie's asking,
been doing what people are wanting to do. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, there's yeah, I was going to say what I'd like him to do, but no, better not. Charlie, thank you very much for the £5 super chat there, mate. What are the chances of getting PR in the next Parliament? Now, I'll leave it to give Phil his opinion on this, but I don't believe that it'll happen in the next Parliament. I think it'll be something that might be on the manifesto for 2029.
Yeah, there's zero chance.
Zero. Okay, well, there you go.
Absolutely zero. The battle, I'm going to do my stream on this tomorrow. The battle is to make them put it on the following manifesto.
Yeah,
that is the strategy. There's zero chance of getting them to put it on the next one, even though that would be the best time to do it in many ways.
Yeah,
but that's not going to happen. So the battle is to make them put it on for the next one.
It is quite frustrating that they're not putting it on this one because it's not going to lose them any votes, and then when they do it, they can say, "Well, it was in our manifesto."
Yeah,
I'll put so much stuff in this manifesto.
Well, you have to be a bit careful, but for something like this is, because I keep saying, like, whatever Labour do, they've got all these plans to make all these changes, and some of them they will, and some of them they won't, because some of them, they will have not thought it through, and they'll have had all the best intentions, but ultimately, not every, no plan survives contact with the enemy, as they say. But whatever they achieve is for nothing if they don't change the voting system, because the voting system favours the Conservatives.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really all there's to it.
It does. In the chat, we've got Business Cat saying scrapping HS2 probably plays well in the blue wall, but I don't think that it does, because the blue wall that it's gone through is still getting built no matter what. They're not going to stop building that. And as Phil was saying the other day, it's going to be a road to nowhere, or a rail line to nowhere, because it's going to start just outside Birmingham city centre and end at Old Oak Common. And so by the time you've got to these stations, like on the overground or whatever, that's the time that you would have saved by taking the fast train. Who's going to take it?
Well, that's the thing. No one's going to take that train. If you put a train on that line, no one's going to take it.
No. So I don't think that scrapping HS2 is going to. I mean, maybe they scrapped it altogether, but they're not going to do that. They're going to have this train to nowhere. That's the plan. Big white elephants. That's cost £100 billion, and they're not going to build the bit that actually people wanted, which was Birmingham to Manchester.
It's even better than that, because they're not talking about not building the rest of it. They're talking about rephasing, in other words, doing it later. So then what they get to do is they get to do nothing. They get to build this rail to nowhere, and then spend the next few years with Labour in government going, why aren't you building the rest of it then?
Yeah.
But then Labour have said that the Tories should build the rest of it. So they've sort of basically committed themselves to doing it, which I thought was a bit stupid.
Chatty Rat says Labour won't bring in PR. It's not in their interest. Now, I take exception to this because I was there at the conference last year when the conference delegates voted to adopt PR as a policy for Labour, and there's so much so many people in Labour that want PR now, and I think that more and more people are seeing that it is actually in Labour's interest because it'll stop the Tories ever gaining power in their current form ever again. Because they're just the people of this country, over 50% of them voted for parties that promised a second referendum
you've got
on the EU in the last election, last GE.
You've got a few people in Labour. It is a few people now trying to claim that PR and brings in extremists. It's like, no, it doesn't. First past the post brings in extremists, and we could prove that. First, because what happened was in 2010, David Cameron's Tories took power, or at least formed a government, but who really took power were the extreme Eurosceptics in that party, who have then driven the narrative ever since.
Yeah.
So what we got was like David Cameron, who looked like a moderate Tory. So we got the sort of face of moderate conservatism, but that's not what we got in terms of policies.
No.
And what we've had is the extreme far right.
Yeah. From the get-go, we had austerity.
Exactly.
Didn't we?
Yeah. And that played into their hands because that then dropped people's living standards.
Yeah.
So then people were really struggling. It's like, well, you're struggling. It's because of all this money we throw to the EU. We should just be able to do other things. And because they'd now had several years of this, and going, okay, well, we'll vote for that. People believing that it wouldn't fundamentally change a lot, but maybe it can do some good. Why not?
Yeah.
They've been driving it ever since. And it's like I say, the biggest argument for PR. There's lots of arguments for PR. There's, on fundamental democratic fairness and one person, one vote and all the rest of it. But the biggest argument of all is we had one extreme policy pushed through, particularly Brexit. And the next time they come back in, they could well drive home this idea of leaving the Council of Europe as well, because that's now festering. And that idea won't go away. It'll fade into the background, just like Brexit did. It'll fade into the background. And what will happen is a moderate-looking conservative leadership will take power again. But these voices haven't gone away.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter whether Braverman's there or not. She's just one of them. Like, the idea will be there and it'll be pushed. As soon as the Tories come back in and Labour are busy melting down again, like they always do when they've lost power, then they will come back.
Cheers.
And they will push that. That next stage of isolating Britain from the rest of the world.
Yeah. So big thanks to Frank Lamosa, who's dropped £5 in to the Super Chat Fund. Back in the UK, so no more Japanese yen, I think that is. But media regulation probably more important than electoral reform, current environment, prevents honest debate, which brings us into the thing we were going to talk about next, which is about GB News. But one moment, because Simon Wyndham has thrown £10 in Super Chat. The best thing about HS2 will be when it's turned into a country-length cycling path.
Yeah, big old cycling path. I will just say, though, about Frank's thing about the media regulation, I do disagree. We do need more media regulation. In fact, I've done my second video on my channel about it again today, related to the Mail on Sunday. But but with PR, no, PR is still more important, because media regulation by necessity is going to be a very slow process, bit by bit, so that you don't start a full-scale war with the media. So it'll be bit by bit over a great many years. And even then, you can't say for certain that you will definitely fix our news media. Whereas with PR, it'll be pretty much an overnight thing.
Yeah.
And it will immediately stop any narrow interest group taking 100% of the power in Parliament.
Yeah. Well, talking about sort of media regulation, I heard on the radio this morning that I think Civitas, which was a branch of the IEA, one of those
Yeah.
mysteriously funded think tanks out of 55 Tufton Street that
Mm.
tell older people what to think. Not all old people. Yeah, they put out a fake, an absolutely 100% fake research paper report, saying that if we go for net zero, it's going to cost every household £6,000. And do you know what this smacks to me of? The bullshit about the membership of the EU cost us 350 million a week. No, it didn't. We made 1.9 billion a week from our membership of the EU. That is subsidies, that is investment, that is trade. And if you minus the 350, which was a bullshit,
which it didn't even cost that.
It didn't even cost that, but even you get the net, which was way over 1.5 billion a week. That was the net. And the same thing is true with net zero, is that actually creating green jobs and having energy being made in the UK from offshore wind or solar or hydroelectric or even nuclear creates jobs in this country, creates wealth in this country. And the interesting thing, sorry, go on, Phil.
I was just going to say, the other thing as well is, in terms of more sensible reports, is they do note that there is a cost to net zero because it requires an investment. But there's also, I think OBR have pointed out, the cost of not pursuing net zero, because there's a cost to that as well, is more than twice as great.
Way more. Yeah.
So,
all the crap we've got to clean up. But what I was going to say is the important thing about all this is that this was reported without any kind of, critical thinking by the Sun, by the Express, by the Mail, by the Telegraph, I think even by the Spectator. Just essentially they got a press release from a think tank that is funded by petrochemical companies, and they said, okay, this is true, and they put out this fear piece to people, thinking, oh no, we better not go for net zero because it's going to cost me £6,000, and I'm already feeling the pinch. And that to me is everything that is wrong with these think tanks, with charities in the UK. I can't believe that the IEA is a charity. God, give me strength. And also, what's wrong with the press? What's wrong with the
well, this is the media. This is why I'd like to talk for my second video today about the Mail on Sunday, because they have now been forced to correct. They haven't apologised, but they've been forced to correct a racist article that was written by Suella Braverman in April, and that they published. And it was easily proved that what the claim in it was provably false, like using Home Office's own data, provably false. And the Mail's argument is, oh yeah, we did query that line, but they said it was okay. So first of all, they queried the line, so they knew it was false. And second of all, their argument is they queried this line with a known liar who said it's fine, and so they went ahead and published it. And it's like, no.
Who was the known liar? Sorry, Phil. Who was the known liar?
Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary.
Oh my God.
So it's
she's had a week.
Yeah. So you think, the onus has to be on the media to take all reasonable steps required to publish accurate information, and there has to be real consequences if they don't. And I mean real consequences. I actually see no harm, and I've said this earlier this week, in if you apply Labour's plans for how to deal with water companies, a lot of it could work for the media.
Yeah.
The idea of automatic fines if you publish something inaccurately. The idea, even if people continually breach the rules, of striking them off. In other words, they're not allowed to publish anything.
Wow.
Why not something like that? Actually have journalists being a properly protected term with professional standards. And like being a doctor, you can't practice medicine if you're struck off. Have the same thing with journalism, not even independently, not even freelance. You can't even go on YouTube, if you've been, well, actually that you could probably not be able to do that. But in terms of accredited media outlets, let's say, ones that sort of have a license to, as such, the main ones, that you cannot actually publish anything with them.
Did you see the head of Ofcom, who's a very posh lady called Dame? I've forgotten her name. And she was on Channel 4 News last night, basically saying that GB News isn't a news channel because they have different programs on, and it's fair enough. And then today, there's going to be an interview between Lee Neanderthal, and Suella Braverman on this news channel. 2 Tories. There's no Labour people. There's no Lib Dems.
No,
There's no Greens. There's no SNP.
this is
there's no
like,
Plaid
I think,
Cymru.
who
And they
was
say
it saying?
they were just saying that they can't do anything proactively. So even though this program has been, they've said this is going to happen, that they can only do something after the event. And I'm looking at this going, that's like saying if someone says, I'm going to murder someone tonight, legally, they can't do anything about that. They have to just let them murder them, and then they can do something about it. And it's just, it's abhorrent. It's absolutely abhorrent.
It is. And
she did go to private school, yes, Tim.
Well, yeah. The thing is though, like, so I can't remember who it was now. It may have been Otto English was making the point. It's like,
he went to private school as well.
Okay, should we just take it as read that everyone in broadcast has been to private school?
Because they have. That's why we're on YouTube, mate.
I will actually point something out interesting in a minute when I finish this thought. But the issue, like what he was saying is, like, if you've got like a member of the Conservative Party interviewing a member of the Conservative government, then it's not an interview, it's a party political broadcast. They're basic, and this is the thing, like Rishi Sunak, whenever he likes, can put out a party political broadcast, but when he does, Labour have a right to reply. So do other opposition parties come to it, but Labour have a right to reply. So if Rishi Sunak does a party political broadcast, I don't think he's actually done one, has he? I don't think he's actually done one. But then Keir Starmer, the media have to show one from Keir Starmer as well. Whereas when they do it like this, they don't. So Labour have no right of reply. So it's basically
disgusting, isn't it?
It is, isn't it? But Adam Bianco, by the way, if anyone's on Twitter and doesn't follow him, he's at Byline Times. He's always on the ball. So about the, your favorite thing, private schools, and there's lots of things in the media trying to defend, talk. It's absolutely outrageous. You're going to charge 20%.
Class war, mate. Class war. 1 million children don't have enough food in their belly in this country, but apparently, putting a little bit of tax on the incredibly wealthy to start with is class war.
Adam Bianco's shown a bit of interesting stats here. But 44% of newspaper columnists and 43% of news media people went to private school, which might explain why there are so many articles
Do you think?
attacking it.
Yeah, exactly. And their kids go as well. This is the thing. I mean, we talk about like Dominic Raab and Priti Patel and all that lot who didn't go to private school, but rose up in the Tories. Their kids go to private schools. They have a vested interest in it not costing that much because they want to spend their money on cocaine or whatever it is the Tories spend all their money on. I assume it's cocaine because of the way they behave. Captain Bart Roberts there. Thank you for the £2 super chat. GBBs where acting careers go to die. Well, journalism careers apparently as well. We've just heard that Calvin Robinson or Sideshow God, as he's known, has now been kicked off. He's been suspended, at least, from GBBs. And along with Dan Wootton, who may be a serial sex offender. We don't know. No one will bother investigating.
Well, they will. And Peter Jukes has said, he basically just said today at Byline Times, because they're the ones who basically broke a lot of the stuff on Dan Wootton. And he has said, he has suggested in the next couple of months a lot more is going to come out. Put it that way.
Oh God!
He says what you've found out so far. Yeah, that's nothing.
It's the tip of the iceberg. He's not a very nice man. And also, talking not very nice men, Lawrence Fox has also been suspended and is now spitting feathers on X or Twitter or whatever it's called these days. Because freedom of speech. Freedom of speech.
He basically suspended himself because he refused to go to work. He said he wasn't going to do the show tonight. So then they suspended him. Well, of course they did, because you've basically gone on strike.
Oh my God.
So this is Peter Jukes. Yes, I think it was like midnight he posted this or something, very late on anyway. It says, the thing about the Wootton story, and you can quote me on this in a couple of months, we're only just scraping the surface.
God damn it.
So,
Peter, he's not coming on. He won't be on our panel, but he will be there at our live show in a couple of weeks at the Labour Party conference on the Monday, along with me, Phil, Marina Purkis, Supertansky, and Femi. So if you want to get tickets for that, the link is in the description. Sorry, little advert there, Phil. While you're busy searching for stuff online. But
No,
yeah,
no, I was just having a look at the other things he was posting today. That's all.
GBBs have 11 is it 11 Ofcom investigations going on at the
No,
moment?
isn't it more than that now? I thought it was over a dozen. I thought isn't. I don't know. Who knows? It goes up by
It
the
was
hour.
brought up, I think, by Kathy Newman last night on Channel 4 News,
Right.
where she was sort of grilling the lady from Ofcom, whose name escapes me at
Right.
the moment. I'm sure someone put it in the chat. Yeah, the fact that these watchdogs, that the regulators of all these different industries, whether it be broadcasting or water or education, they're all old school chums of the Tories who are in charge of literally everything.
Hmm.
And they all meet up, they all have dinner parties together, the kids play together, and they're all, they are all in it together,
Well,
as far as they're concerned. And
I
it
mean,
works
on
quite
this
well.
same graphic, public body
12.
chairs 45%. And as you say, many of them, like 45% who went to private school, but potentially many more of them whose children go to private school.
Yes.
Because some of them will have sort of taken advantage of social mobility opportunities themselves.
Yeah.
And yeah.
Isabel Cokeshott, she went to private school. Yeah. All of the leading Brexiteers did. And, we often, I know we don't really try and talk about the previous leader of the Labour Party so much, but literally all the people who surrounded him were all posh. There was one guy called Andrew Murray who was part of the bloody aristocracy. They all went to private school. And, I hate the term like champagne socialist, because I think it's ridiculous that just because someone has done well in life or, was born into money, they can't
I think
have socialist ideals. But at the same time, it felt a bit patronizing. It felt a bit like, oh, we'll help little people. Like when white people go to Africa.
No, but I have much more time for a so-called champagne socialist than I do, because
yeah,
someone who has spent their entire lives in poverty, of course, unless they're a fucking idiot, is going to support a Labour government over a Conservative government. It's in their interest. Whereas someone who's doing really well, they're doing it out of for other people.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
they're actually, it's like the same thing I get, when some people will do this as a flex. It's like a boast. I've been a Labour supporter all my life. I used to go out handing out leaflets when I was a little nipper. And it's like, yeah, so your parents gave you that. Your parents brought you up to do that. What you're basically saying is you've never actually had an adult thought about politics. Because otherwise,
that's what I got into trouble with Owen Jones about, because he was like, so you stood against a Labour MP? I'm like, well, I helped get that Labour MP selected in the first place. And I did write to him saying if he voted to activate Article 50, I would stand against him in the next election. Yeah. That's a bit of a joke. I didn't really expect Theresa May to announce the election a few weeks later, okay?
But it's like, if someone's trying to use it as obviously there will be people who grew up in a Labour household and then became Labour, and they could still have thought about it themselves and come to their own decision. But if you're using it as a flex, that as a child you were a Labour supporter, it's like, well, you weren't a Labour supporter. Your parents were indoctrinating you. So you're basically admitting you've never thought about it. Why would you do that?
Well, it's a purity test, which I really disagree with, and it was one of the things that plagued Labour in those years between sort of 2015 and 2020, was just that this idea that you had to be more Labour than Labour in order to be in the party, and if you weren't, completely aligned with the leadership or whoever on every single policy, then you should F off and join the Tories. And for someone like me, who all my adult life,
quite a lot of people did,
to be told to F off and join the Tories, that's one of the biggest insults you can say to a socialist scouser.
It's one thing to do it to members. I don't really care about that. But they basically did it to voters in 2019. Then they did. It's like, oh, well, you might as well just vote for the Tories then. All right. Then.
Okay, and they did. They did vote for the Tories. Tell people to vote for the other side. But also, I mean, that there was a lot of hand-wringing at the time about the previous Labour administration. And I've spoken about this before, where it's like the worst possible line on a doorstep when you're a politician trying to get people to vote for your party is, I know we were really, really shit the last time we were in office, but this time will be amazing. And
I mean, that was a disaster through Miliband and Corbyn's time, actually apologising for their time in government.
Yeah. constantly apologising, constantly hand-wringing. And we all know Iraq was a disaster. But what a lot of people don't know is how much good stuff Labour did in office. And that's what they should have been going on
Yeah,
about more than anything
yeah,
else. Oh, and anyone who disagreed with them was a Blairite. And I'm like, I didn't even like Tony
yeah.
Blair. I didn't vote Labour
No.
in I didn't vote Labour in 2005 because of the Iraq War, and I voted for them in 2010 because Stephen Twigg was going to be my new MP. So I was quite excited about that because he's a lovely bloke. But yeah, it was always like a personal decision for me. It was never, oh, this is my football team. This is what I've got to support. I'll be snookered anyway because half my family are Labour and the other half are Tories. So, you know. and I hate it when people call me a centralist because I'm really not. I'm really not. I'm quite extreme, actually.
Yeah.
Get a drink inside.
Well, I'm quite far.
Tell you what I
That's
would
what
do.
people say. It's the identity politics that I hate. And I just try and explain to people, like, people will think, oh, you don't support Corbyn, therefore you're centrist. Like, no, my personal views are further to the left than Corbyn's manifesto. Just not to say further to the left than Corbyn.
Yeah.
But I
that
can't
first
do the
one though. I mean, he was going to reduce. He was going to reduce student fees to £6,000 a year to 9,000. I'm like, is that it? Is that it? And like that 2017 manifesto, it wasn't socialist enough for me.
Well, the thing is,
also, by the way, I did stand in the most safe Labour seat in the entire country, so I wasn't expecting to win.
The 2017 manifesto was just like it was basically Ed Miliband because they didn't have time. Because I keep going back to this and I can't believe it. It's like people were going, oh, there might be a snap election. Oh, should we get ready for a snap election? And then Theresa May said, oh, there's not going to be a snap election. And then like Jeremy Corbyn, oh, she said there's not. That Tory leader said there's not going to be a snap election. Oh, I'm sure we can trust her. Like, what?
Well, this is what I was going to circle back to about this whole thing of if there is a snap election, is Labour ready? Because you were talking the other day about them having to scrabble to get candidates in place.
Yeah, they haven't got all their candidates sorted, but they can do that. But they've got the manifesto ready. They've had their manifesto ready since last year. Yes, they keep changing it, but they've had one ready to go as far back as last summer. Because when Boris Johnson started melting down, they thought one might come, and it could have done. For all they knew, the Tory party's been on suicide watch as far as Labour's concerned since last year. Yeah. So they're constantly ready to go. Someone's just asking about thoughts on Tony Benn. I'm sure. My thoughts on Tony Benn are, it's like a lot of people in Labour. Is right idea, heart's in the right place, but he got sucked into tribalism as well. He got sucked into tribalism, and it's like you could sort of think. I mean, I was very young at the time, so I only know this historically. But that famous Labour conference where Neil Kinnock gave his speech that pissed off the militant groups, and it's like Tony Benn was sort of at that point having a real crisis of conscience, wasn't he? Because it was sort of like his tribe, but he could also see the damage they were causing.
Well, especially in Liverpool. Oh my God.
Yeah.
Don Catton and his lot.
And that's the problem when you get sucked into a tribe. Like, well, people will think, oh, because I'm appreciative of what Starmer's doing for Labour, I must be a Starmerite. It's like, no.
Yeah.
As soon as I think that if one of two things happens, let's say Starmer, it might not be anything to do with him, might be nothing to do with it, might be no fault of his at all. If Starmer becomes a net drag on the electability of Labour, I'll want him completely gone out the way. Yeah. Thank you very much for all your help. Piss off. Yeah. Or if someone emerges who will be a better leader, again, I'll want him to stand back. And he won't have had to do anything wrong. He won't have had to do another Iraq or anything stupid like that. It's as far as I'm concerned, all these people are servants. They are there in the service of making sure there's a Labour government, and they should do whatever they can to do that. If that means helping out, it means help out. If it means get the hell out the road, get the hell out the road. I don't care about any of them on a personal level. I don't know any of them. I don't mind keeping it that way. I just want them to do their level best to get Labour into government. And there are some Labour MPs with whom I agree on a great many policy areas, and I broadly approve of their general campaigns, but I don't think they should be Labour MPs because they do not toe the party line.
Yeah.
And that toe the party line isn't like blindly going along with a particular policy if it's like the wrong policy. What I mean is they actively attack the idea of voting for Labour, and it's like, what are you doing?
Well, that's my problem with it. It's like the Tories are right there. Attack them. Attack the Tories. And going back to sort of the whole Brexit years, it was a big bugbear of mine that we just weren't supported by the Labour top brass when we were having hundreds of thousands of people out on the streets protesting against literally the Tories' flagship policy. You know what I mean? And it was something that was going to affect every man, woman, and child in the United Kingdom. It wasn't some esoteric thing that only affects a small portion of the people, or maybe the very rich, or maybe this group of religious people, or this group of this ethnicity. It was like something that would actually affect absolutely everyone. And it was their massive policy. I mean, in 2019, that their slogan for the election was "Get Brexit Done," and just not having that support was the most frustrating thing that's happened to me in my life so far. I've got to say, I've dealt with some frustrating things in my time, but I think that's got to take the biscuit.
Well, the argument as well was, we can't oppose it because it's like, people voted for it. So it's like, well, they voted for the Conservatives in 2015 as well. Does that mean you support their manifesto? No, you oppose their manifesto. You work on the principle that you can take whatever line you like. I understand there's obviously a political danger in taking the line that voters voted incorrectly, because then you're telling voters they're a bit stupid. So then you base it on the idea that they were lied to instead. Why not that? Because that's true.
Yeah.
You argue again, if Labour lose an election, they argue the basis that the Tories weren't honest in their manifesto. So you do the same for Brexit. So it was an absolute crap argument.
Yeah, I want to tackle this comment in the saying that Corbyn, he campaigned for Remain. Piss off! I'm sorry, he wouldn't appear on a platform with David Cameron. He wouldn't. He
pissed off on
spoken in
holiday.
the past talking about the the mechanical Frankenstein that was the EU. He pissed off on holiday. A week before the referendum, half of Labour voters polled didn't know if Labour were for or against Brexit. That is what's the word? Abdication, is it? What's the word?
Abdication, yeah.
Of leadership. That right there. Of responsibility.
I mean, he shouldn't have been leading the Remain campaign anyway with Cam. Neither should Cameron.
Oh no, neither of them were Remainers. Both of them were. They had
the Eurosceptic at the very least.
They were two Eurosceptics running. Two wealthy Eurosceptics running our campaign to stay in the EU, which will not affect wealthy people. And this is one of the things that, I mean, I see the whole Brexit thing as a massive class war from the ruling class, because they will continue as normal pretty much, because they can afford to go and live in Malta or in Spain or in Italy. They've got $5,000 in the bank accounts. They can do that. You can't. I can't. Like that's just the way it is. We used to be able to retire in 31 other countries around our continent, and we can no longer do that. But the rich still can. The people who pushed Brexit still can. So, I'm not having this, you can look on YouTube and find speeches where, Corbyn said something really kind of milky toast about the EU. I thought it was all right. Like, give it 7 out of 10. Thanks, mate. Cheers.
Speaking of which, the Mirror have produced their annual photograph of all the champagne delivery to the Tory party conference.
Oh God. That's kind of painful. Corbyn avowed Lexiters whispering in his ear all along. Yeah, I mean, but there were clips of him basically slagging off the EU before,
he voted against the EU every single time in Parliament.
Yeah. He had him leading the forces.
But it shouldn't have done. I mean, it's all there was to it. There was no need. There was no need for either Corbyn or Cameron to have led the campaign. Be part of it, sure, whatever. Although preferably not. But there was no need for them to have led it. Could have been led by actual Remainers.
Yeah. Which might have worked. Also, if so many lies weren't told and it was a binding referendum instead of a... But and let's not forget as well, the day after the referendum result, Corbyn was on the telly saying we should activate Article 50 straight away.
Immediately.
2-year countdown to pull out of a nearly 50-year... what's it called? Over 50 years, wasn't it? Of a political international grouping. Union. Yeah, since the EEC of 1973, wasn't Waiting a decade plus isn't pragmatism for real people. It's just pandering to party politics, only important to those directly or indirectly involved in it. Well, I mean, Nick, the thing is, when we talk about getting back into the EU and how long it's going to take, I mean, yeah, you're right. It is playing politics because, but also there's the point that 17 million people did vote to leave the EU, and a good number of them who are still alive still think it's a good idea. They think it's the best thing they've ever done.
Yeah, ultimately the bottom line is this: like, let us say Keir Starmer took leave of his senses, and either before or after the election says we should rejoin the EU. What's he going to do about it? Is he going to apply to rejoin the EU? The EU will say, "Well, no, your application is invalid," and the reason it's invalid, if it has to be settled. The EU has to be of the view that your country wants to join the EU, and it doesn't, because the Conservative Party, which is the alternative to Labour, so in a few years' time there'd be an election, another election, and the Conservatives could easily form the government. And if they are promising to just scrap any accession at that point, why would the EU do it? It's pointless.
Yeah.
We have to meet certain criteria. There's certain criteria which includes a screening process before you can actually have your application accepted. I mean, it's a long old time to go from application to joining anyway, very long time. But we can't even get over the first hurdle until the Conservatives are on board. And if that sounds like, well, that'll never happen, it will happen. Because the Conservatives want to get elected as well. Right, not right now, they don't. They've lost their minds. Yeah. But at some point, they'll want to get elected. So they'll have to be sensitive to public opinion. So what we actually need to do, and I have no problem with people. There's lots of people very effectively barrack politicians over this, and they should continue to do so. And it's really important to do that. But ultimately, when you want to see movement from the politicians, you need to push that opinion change amongst the public.
Yeah. Can I just quickly ask, why have you got a nuclear explosion behind you?
Because that seems to be what's happening in the news today.
Well, it's all going off.
Yeah. Well, that was my first thought when I was like going through the news this morning. Everything is going mad.
Well, yeah. I mean, one of the things that we're going to circle back to is just talking about GB News and the fact that it has lasted so long and why that is. And it's obviously not making any money. And it's kind of ruining the careers of anyone who's associated with it. Andrew Neil.
It's not ruined his career. He can get work whenever he wants. He has done. It was a bit embarrassing for him, but I don't think it's ruined his career. He escaped good and early.
Yeah. TMS is saying the nuclear explosion is the sycamore tree. That's just up the road from me, It's only about 20 minutes drive. Not far.
It's in Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, that tree.
It is. And my partner's been there loads of times, and she said she always, we discussed actually going there at some, but it was raining or whatever. Now we never can. But bit of good news on that front. There's a chance that since it's a sycamore tree, it might regrow from the stump. But
have you seen the latest though?
If you're going to do that, you should do it in spring, I think, not in autumn.
The likes of Kevin Edgelord are now saying, because they've arrested a 16-year-old over it, oh, well, this is why we shouldn't give 16-year-olds the vote. So I sort of suggested, okay, so when we find out that the people vandalising all these ULEZ cameras in London are Tory supporters, does that mean we should take the vote away from Tory supporters?
Yes, we should. Please don't vote. Yeah, but they're doing a good job of that themselves with their voter suppression tactics that seem to have affected Tory voters more than any other voters. But those
don't say, but it hasn't.
But it's affected thousands of people, and disproportionately people who are disabled or people who find it difficult to get to the polling station.
That's what the Electoral Commissioner, Jacob Rees-Mogg, said. Oh, we seem to have shot ourselves in the foot with our cunning plan to suppress voting by affecting mostly our own voters.
How can he say that out loud?
Because he's an idiot. He'll say whatever he likes. Because the way he thought in his tiny little walnut brain, is,
Everyone not
well,
blind.
mostly it's old people who vote in elections, and old people tend to vote Conservative. Therefore, we must have
Mm,
screwed over Conservative voters. But it's like, no, this is not what happened, is it?
no, but I mean, it is incredibly frustrating that they can do that and just brag about it afterwards and
Mm,
just be like, yeah,
yeah.
we did that. You know,
Well, that's how broken. That's how broken we are as a society. When you know someone who wasn't a cabinet minister at the time, but it was formerly a cabinet minister, can come out and say that, and people don't even raise an eyebrow, and it's like,
yeah,
yeah, you know. So he was a member of the government whilst the decision was being made. So he was basically saying that the government consciously tried to steal votes,
yeah,
and he can say that,
yeah,
and no one bats an eyelid
yeah. Why don't Labour kick off about this stuff? That's what I always
because
wonder. You
they
know,
know that people don't bat an eyelid. That's why they know that.
but they
They
wouldn't they
they
if Labour
no.
got people up in arms? I'm sure they could.
Yeah, but Labour can't get people up in arms. I keep saying, you know,
Is
they're
that a
shit.
comms problem?
Yeah, well, whatever. It's partly it's two things. Okay, partly it's a comms problem, but
Yeah,
partly it's just the fact, like I keep saying, you've got the Conservative Party, and you've got the BBC, and you've got the Telegraph, and the Mail, and the Times, and all these outlets that are all pushing the same line on certain issues.
mm.
So people feel, well, all these very different outlets are all saying the same thing. And then the Labour Party come along and saying, oh, no, by the way, they're all lying to you. We're the ones telling you the truth. So Labour sound crazy. So they can't do that.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
Labour, there is an extent where I think because of that, there are times where maybe they could effectively influence public perception, and they don't, just because the odds are stacked against them. Maybe there's a fear element as well. But mostly, no. Labour just have to be conscious of what that opinion is and work with it.
Yeah.
And they do polling all the time and focus groups all the time.
I just feel like they could just do a better job in general.
Oh, of course
Uh,
they could, but
Nick is saying the full rejoin or nothing brigade probably aren't in a rush for whatever reason, have Irish passports, etc. To be honest with you, at the march last weekend that Phil and I were at, everyone I spoke to said it's going to be a long process and this is step by step. We're going to rejoin Horizon and then Galileo and Erasmus and other names. Eventually some kind of membership at the single market, maybe an associate membership at the single market. It is going to be a process. I mean, I don't think even the most adamant of hardline rejoiners, of whom I am one, are rejoin or nothing. Like, honestly, when we rejoined Horizon a couple of weeks ago, I was like, yes, okay, this is the road back to our membership of the EU. But I do think it's going to be a long process.
Yeah, I think where there's an urgency amongst people, it's for politicians to start talking honestly about it. But I just think I just wish people would see, like, I mean, there's got to be a change in the narrative when Labour in power. Like for example, there has never been Rishi Sunak just recently has been trying to say, oh, I'm trying to be honest with you about the costs of all these things like net zero. I want to be honest with the people about the trade-offs. It's like, okay, so when can we expect the economic impact assessment report on Brexit then? Huh?
Yeah.
When can we expect? Because we've had economic impact assessments for the various trade deals, like with, say, New Zealand, Australia, Japan. We'll get one for India if he gets that through before the election.
I think that's what he's waiting for. I think he's waiting for that, then he'll go, because he will do personally very well out of that.
Yeah,
and when he's not Tory leader anymore, he's going to resign as an MP and he's going to piss off to America and sit in all his money.
He's really pushing for that. He's got meetings set up for next month and everything. He's really pushing for that, but we didn't get an economic impact assessment report for the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, the largest post-Brexit trade deal. Yeah, didn't get that. Now, here's the thing. So I don't expect Labour, but if Labour are going to say that they're a serious government, they should be producing economic impact assessments for all policies that have an economic angle, right? Otherwise, they're not serious anyway. Now, I don't expect them to go back and retroactively produce assessment reports for things the Tories did, but they should produce them for things they do. They want to renegotiate the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. Now, some bits of it are up for discussion anyway. During the next Parliament, which might mean there'll be some changes. So does that mean we'll get an economic impact assessment report?
Yeah.
Because we should. And as soon as that starts to happen, as soon as you actually start to get economic reports, official economic reports on things related to Brexit, then surely you advance the conversation. And also Labour, are going, although at the moment, it's quite vague, they're going to have to start answering questions when they're in government.
Yeah.
So I think, there's the opportunity to shift the public debate. Now, we know there'll be a lot of kickback in the media, so you have to be aware of that as well. But I think there's going to be a lot of things that will necessarily change with the Labour government about the way we can discuss Brexit.
Well, yeah. Well, I hope that happens. I mean, I hope that we have a bit more of a free and fair discussion. But I do think that this all has to go hand in hand. Like, there is no magic bullet for what the Tories have done to this country and what the tabloid press, the gutter press have done to this country. And if we are going to have grown-up, civilized conversations about things, we really need to get the Tories out and the tabloids under control, because they can't be allowed to continue to spew bile and hatred and lies, just out and out lies, like the £6,000 that it's going to cost every family in the UK if we go to net zero. It's just a lie, and there's no justification for that appearing in multiple publications. And then what? They're going to be told to put an apology on page 26 in like 17 weeks time. It's like, it's not enough. It's just not enough.
That's the problem when they post something like this, folks. Even if and it is generally 6 months later, they're told to correct it. So what happens is the original article not only is read by lots of people who read that publication, but it's shared. It's shared by people on social media where it suits their confirmation bias to do so. So when the correction comes in, first of all, yes, it's not as prominent as the original one, but also those same people who were sharing the original won't share the correction, and there's nothing to make them. So it will never ever, the original will always be seen by far more people than the correction.
Well, the fact that the right-wing media in the mainstream media in the United Kingdom has just gone absolutely bananas in the last few years, the power, the reach, we've got things like Talk TV now, we've got GB News broadcasting every day on our TV, on TV, and also the right-wing slants of so much stuff on social media, which we saw in 2016 in the Brexit referendum, but also in the Trump election in 2016, and we're still seeing it today, where these big owners, these multi-billionaire owners of these social media companies just don't care as long as it gets clicks. What gets more clicks? People being horrible rather than people being nice, and that's the end of it. If you're right wing, you're more likely to be horrible and want to post horrible things about people, whereas if you're left wing, you're more likely to say, hey, why don't we all live and let live? And
I wish that were true.
Well, I mean, just more likely. I'm not saying it's 100%, but the idea that a lot of the information that people consume every day in their everyday lives on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, on the newspapers that they read, and the TV programs that they watch has that right-wing slant, that right-wing anti-progress, pro-extinctionist slant of like, let's all just burn the world and make money out of it while we go. Which is, I'm sure it's in someone's interest for all the oil that is left in the world to be burnt over the next 20 years, but I don't know.
The people who sell it.
Oh yeah, maybe. Do they think they're going to survive though? I mean, this is the one thing that I just can't get my head around.
Who knows? I honestly don't know what they think. They'll think that their wealth, they'll think that humanity is not going to die out within the span of their lifetime, and they're so wealthy that they can personally, shelter themselves from, as climate change starts to take its toll, it won't take its toll on them.
Yeah. Because they'll be in a fortress and they'll have their own private security, but it just seems mad that
300 miles inland.
Yeah, these sort of rich people who are like, I want my kids not, I don't have to pay VAT on my kids' private school. I don't want my kids to have to pay inheritance tax when they inherit my vast fortune. But they're setting them up, their children, to live in a world where rich people will be hunted for sport. I can't put it any more bluntly than that. Whoever's in charge in an anarchy is the guy with the biggest stick. And a lot of these Lord Ponsonby Smides aren't
Well, yeah, I mean, you know,
They're
you
not
would
going to
have thought
last long. That's all I can
you'd
say.
have thought the French Revolution would be a bit of a cautionary tale, but we never learn from history, do we?
No, no.
We don't even learn from
Con-
recent history, let alone one
condemned
that's
to repeat
three
it
centuries
again and
old.
again. But yeah, I mean, and the thing is, a lot of the, one of the people in the chat there is saying even the far left. I think it's to regards to like just
It's not even.
people being a bit nicer. But the right wing rhetoric is so violent. It's so aggressive. It's so misogynistic. It's so homophobic, transphobic. I mean, it's everything that it's just trying to rile people up every day to demonize minorities, whether they be asylum seekers or travelers or just people who want to get back into the EU as soon as possible. And it's not sustainable. You can't keep this level of hatred bubbling away. I think something's got to give.
Well, eventually it does. That's why they've had to suspend a few people from GB News. But it's just that being tribal is what attracts the clicks there. That's the problem. It's a little bit like I always think, if you have some bad customer service, you complain.
Yeah.
But very few people get particularly good customer service and write a letter of commendation to their boss or something. Occasionally, very rarely.
That's very true. People like to complain because it's easier, isn't it? And it's
Yeah.
you're more emotionally invested in you've had a bad time than if someone else has, made things good for you. And that's kind of painful. And I'm not immune to that. I don't know if anyone is.
No.
I think most of my Google reviews are slagging something off rather than praising something.
Well, yeah.
Which
Because
is bad.
there's no views in it. People don't want to read, oh, everything's fine.
Yeah, they don't. But
I mean,
also, it's not
even
news,
when,
is it?
yeah, even when the Tory
novel.
media are trying to say that everything's fine, they paint it as it'll be worse under Labour. So it still has to have that like element of doom.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, yeah, it's one of those things, isn't it? Like I used to think it was funny when I was a kid watching the local news, and they'd always have some funny little segments at the end, like some heartwarming thing about a kitten got rescued from a tree or something. And I always used to laugh about it, but actually, now I'm a bit older, I sort of look back and go, we kind of need that. We kind of need the good stuff, as well as the sort of these all.
I don't know, because then the thing is, like, if you've got the news doing these sort of feel-good stories, then wouldn't you be saying, but why aren't you pointing out to all the shit that's going on in the country and holding the government to account for it?
Yeah. Well, exactly. But I mean, I think that the sort of I said this a lot when I was traveling around the world. People were like, "Aren't you scared going to Burkina Faso and Afghanistan and Somalia?" And I said, "Well, the thing is, all these places, like if something happens to you, it's the exception rather than the rule. So when something bad happens in a particular country, like a tourist gets attacked, for instance, it's front page news in that tourist country because it is quite rare for it to happen. But what it does is it gives people a sense that that is a dangerous place. And I remember going to Lebanon years after the war had ended. Like this was probably back in 1999, but it was a good, almost a decade since the war had ended. But people were still at the time going, you can't go to Beirut, you'll die, because that's all they knew of Beirut. They just knew it was this place where it just got the crap bombed out of it and all the buildings had been destroyed and all this kind of stuff. But the reality of the time when I went there, it wasn't like that. So yeah, I sort of blame the media in a way for skewing people's opinion of the world and getting people out this idea that it's a terrible, nasty place where everyone just wants, it's a dog eat dog world where everyone's trying to kill you. The reality is, and it's almost like even worse than the fantasy, is that if someone means you harm in this life, it's probably going to be someone you know. It's not going to be someone just waiting around the corner in Gabon. It's just like, oh, can't wait till that Graham person comes over here after what he said on the internet. Oh, I'll get him. It doesn't really happen. And also, there was a line by, I think it was Jane Godley. Is it Jane Godley? The Scottish comedian, where she said that people are very brave on the internet. The keyboard warriors, they'll call you all sorts. The people you meet in real life, that it's usually fans. It's usually people who are like, well done. Because people just, they don't want to go up to someone and say, I hate you. because it feels strange to them, but behind the anonymity of being online and being behind a keyboard, they can kind of get away with it. Having said that, I do hate the Tories, so maybe I'm not helping myself. But has anyone else left GB News while we've been nattering?
Not that I can see. No, I think it's just those three. But yeah, as I say, there was a Daily Express thing saying that he talked to someone from GB News, and again, whether he was telling the truth or not, we never know. But he says if we end up getting rid of Lawrence Fox and Calvin Robinson out of this, it'll be the best thing that's happened to GB News all year.
One thing before we go, I just wanted to mention. So the other day when what we were doing a video or something, and you had as your background. Oh, it was when you were doing Morning Brew. You had as your background Suella Braverman, but you weren't talking about that. But the picture you had was the reverse angle of her giving her speech this week. There's only about 3 people in the room. Oh my God, it's like this big empty room. Like she was just talking to no one.
She was, yeah. And remember, in fact, let me find it, because
oh my God,
a good number of those were reporters.
Yeah.
There we go. There it is.
Bloody hell. Yeah, look, there's 4 tables. I can see 4 tables, 4 candles, 4 tables.
Yeah, and got quite a lot of them. I mean, you can see the one standing at the back. I'll bet are the reporters. I can see some of them. Like,
I've seen living rooms bigger than that.
Well, this is it. I said in my video on it. Like, you couldn't fill a tea room with the people in that she was talking. She'd gone all the way to America. When she's the Home Secretary, supposed to be dealing with things that she says everything in her department's a disaster, right?
Yeah.
Right. Particularly asylum. So she's gone all the way to America to talk to enough. She could have had them on a Zoom call if they thought she had something intelligent to say. So she's gone all the way to America with Number 10's blessing, even though Rishi Sunak's tried to distance himself from some of her comments. Yeah, it's ridiculous. Those tables aren't full. Look, they're not full.
I can't stop laughing now because Captain Bob Roberts, but I've come up with a title for a first-person shooter: shooting toffs from trains. And I can't stop laughing now because if we actually made that first-person shooter, oh my God, it would be all over the
train.
news.
Are we shooting from the train, or are they on the train? And
we're on the train, not from the train. So we're on the train, and as we go past, we got to shoot toffs. Oh my God, that would be on the front cover of every newspaper. You'll sell a lot of copies. That's all I'm saying. Don't do it, but I'm just saying it would sell a lot of copies. Sorry, I can't stop laughing now. I don't know why it just made it more funny that it was from a train. So it'd be like a rail shooter, literally. Anyway, back to Suella Braverman. Anyway, so yeah, before we go, just to mention her speech, I did find it just the most abhorrent thing to see someone who has benefited from multiculturalism in the UK more than pretty much anyone else, except maybe Rishi Sunak, saying that multiculturalism has failed.
Well, the thing is as well, like you can mean different things by that, because people are instantly saying, "Oh, what Nicolas Sarkozy say? What you mean, that criminal?" But then you could argue in France it has, because like where are the senior black politicians or non-white politicians in France?
Yeah,
you could, and where Angela Merkel said it in Germany. Again, when you say something like that's failed, you don't necessarily mean attempts to make it work are pointless. What you're saying is that the attempts made so far aren't working. But in this country, our favorite dish is chicken tikka masala, which is not an Indian dish, but was, it's like created in this country, but it's like a sort of fusion. We have a non-white Hindu prime minister. We have a non-white home secretary and foreign secretary. So the 3 most senior positions in government are for people who aren't white. Now, I would, in terms of culture, so they're all got the same culture, which is like rich as hell. But, just in terms of the ethnicity side of it, how can you really, you don't want to say it's perfect, but how can you say that multiculturalism in the UK isn't working? Because there's so many. Lisa Nandy made a really good, I don't know whether you heard her thing on Question Time.
Yes, she was brilliant.
Really well.
Check that video out after watching this. Actually, it's very, very good.
Where She was making the point that people, she grew up around people, lots of different ethnicities, and they didn't see it because it was normal for them.
Yeah.
It wasn't unusual. And there was, I saw a video of someone from like this before I was born, but making the point, related to the old Enoch Powell nonsense, and making the point that, where these sort of tensions exist, it tends to be because people are like telling you to be afraid of them. Like you've got people saying, oh, we're going to, like decades ago, before either of us were born, they were sort of saying, oh, you're going to end up with people who come from Mauritius living next door to you. Wouldn't that be terrible? And it's like, why? But people were told this.
All the people I know from Mauritius are gorgeous.
Well, but people were sort of told things like this. It's like, oh, and because change is scary. You're going to have these people who don't have the same color skin as you. It's like, right, man.
If you go to Mauritius, you get a little dodo on the stamp on your passport. They have a little dodo. It's really cute.
It's not a great omen, is it?
No, it's really cute. They've got a little dodo on their entry stamp. I thought that was cool. Anyway,
but the dodo very famously died out because of like visitors, tourists.
Humans.
Well, I mean,
tourists.
But basically
tourists.
People visiting them. I wouldn't have thought it was the greatest thing to stamp in someone's passport.
But it's
anyway,
what Mauritius is known for, and also the most expensive stamp in the world. But yeah,
are you sure Royal Mail are putting the price of theirs? It's going to be £1.20 for first class stamps in.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But very soon, it'll just be to send a letter to Skegness. It'll cost you an arm and a leg. But yeah, I'm just sort of disappointed. I'm not angry. I'm just disappointed with someone of Suella Braverman's ancestry, someone who is ethnically Indian. Her parents were born in Africa, and she was born here, and she's risen up the ranks to one of the most powerful officers of state. And she says, and it feels like spitting in the face of British people as well. Do you know, her fellow British people?
Yeah,
of saying you're not doing enough. It's like, what do you want us to do? We've got an Indian prime minister.
It's divide and rule. She's trying to set communities against themselves.
Yeah.
It's a deliberate attempt to do that, to blame those other people on that other street instead of the government.
Indeed.
Because they can't blame the EU now. So
no,
they need to blame. They're
going to find someone else to blame. Always got to have a scapegoat. Always got to have a scapegoat. Fascism 101. Anyway, right, I'm going to leave it there. Phil, thank you very much for joining us. Will you be making the Labour social tonight? Will you be able to make that?
I don't actually know. I wasn't going to, but then my evening plans were cancelled, so I don't know yet.
Well, hopefully we should be joined by Alex Kerr from Political X, if you watch his channel, or from Sunday Brunch, if you watch him with Maximilian. So hopefully he'll be along tonight. He has threatened to be on the show before, but he's never actually turned up. So this week I'm gonna nail him down. I'm gonna say, Alex, get on the bloody show with you. So hopefully he'll be on the show. Supertansky said she'll do it as well, and we'll see who else we can get on. But that'll be at 9 o'clock tonight. So in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Thanks for all the super chats. Thanks for all the good chat in the chat there as well. Thank you to my co-host Phil Moorhouse, and until 9 o'clock tonight, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.